For more on trade issues and the impact on the global economy, let's bring in Anthony Chan. He's a former chief economist for JPMorgan Chase. He joins me live from New York. Anthony, certainly signs of progress between the world's two biggest economies, goodwill gestures as well. But are they actually any closer to breaking the deadlock?
Well, the reality is that every time something like this happens, we have to believe that they're getting a little bit closer. But the reality is that what they're seeking to do right now is to reach some sort of a ceasefire. And then the next question will be, is the ceasefire temporary or is it a more sustainable ceasefire, even before we start to get the issue resolved?
President Trump certainly seems to think he's winning his trade war with China. Is he?
Well, I think the reality is, and we've seen this in the data, that there are no winners in a trade war. No doubt that the Chinese are hurt more than the United States simply because we import a lot more, but it doesn't exempt the United States from the pain. So I would argue that no one wins in a trade war.
China's Vice Premier Liu He says high-level talks in October will focus on a trade balance, market access, investor protection. Where do you see negotiators narrowing their differences? I mean, these are some very complicated issues on the table.
They really are, and that's the reason why I think that a ceasefire at this juncture is probably more likely than a real deal. A real deal could take more than a year, and some would argue might take years to actually get a finalized deal. But again, incrementally and on a piecemeal basis, we can continue to make progress to avoid escalation, because these tariffs going from 20, 25 to 30 or even higher, that's a lot more dangerous for these two countries that make up almost 40% of world GDP than having a sort of a de-escalation or a ceasefire. And I think that's what is more likely, a ceasefire rather than a total resolution of these trade tensions.
What about U.S. grievances against what they say are forced technology transfers and intellectual property theft by China? How easy is it going to be to resolve those issues?
Well, we've already made some progress on that. The Chinese have agreed to basically meet U.S. demands on that issue. The only issue is whether or not the U.S. can actually verify the enforcement of what the Chinese have agreed to. That's really the sticking point. But at this stage, I think there is an acknowledgement on both sides that that's something that has to be dealt with. And they're moving in that direction, but we're still quite a ways from having a total resolution on that issue.
Anthony, let me move on to where things stand with this U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal, which has yet to be passed by U.S. Congress. What is the holdup?
Well, I think that right now we're still waiting for some more labor protections that the Democrats want to be part of the deal. Obviously, the Democrats are in control in the House, and they'll want to see at least some concessions from Washington before they sign on to pass this important legislation. And I say important because the farmers are being hit on multi-fronts. They've been hurt because of a lack of a trade deal with China, and now they're being hurt potentially if this trade deal gets held up even more. So at this juncture, I think it's important that we move in that direction. The Canadians will probably pass it if they get some clear signs that the U.S. is going to pass it. But we'll probably see some tinkering. But I actually believe that passage of this USMCA trade deal is likely to happen a lot sooner than the resolution of trade tensions between the U.S. and China.
And some are saying Mexico is actually the real winner here, benefiting from the China and the United States trade war. First of all, do you agree? And how exactly is Mexico benefiting?
Well, Mexico is benefiting from the fact that they managed to get a huge number of cars that are going to be exempt from potential tariffs. That is, even if we get mad at them or the White House wants to do something, they got a very big number. It's about 2.6 million cars or so that get exempted. Pickup trucks are always exempted. So this is the bread and butter of Mexico's trade agreement. And so they have some protections that they managed to put into the agreement. So to that extent, they're a winner. But my belief has always been, as an economist, that all the nations benefit from trade agreements and all nations suffer when you have a lack of an agreement.
perhaps President Trump is listening to you right now. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Anthony Chan.